I mentioned how I perfected my microphone stance.
Yes.
I've improved it further. It wasn't as perfect as I expected it to be, but now I don't think things get better than this, because I don't know how to describe it, but just where as I would naturally sit, it's just there in the perfect position. So, I'm very comfortable, and if I rock back on my chair as I'm doing now, I can adjust it, and it's just perfect. I can podcast in complete comfort. It's like there's no microphone even there. So it's brilliant. Anyway,
Let's do this.
let's go. Hello and welcome to Something Near the Centre, a podcast about politics, economics and current events. I'm James.
I'm Will.
And today we're going to be having a chat.
Again. Round
Again.
3.
Round 3, yeah, exactly.
Round 3.
So where are we starting, Will? You can kick us off.
Today I think our schedule will be obviously COVID-19 again, HS2, and has it gone badly off course, Keir Starmer answering some of your questions, and Donald Trump and Obamagate, of course, followed by worst news story and our game, which is Defend the Indefensible this week.
Exciting stuff. You said we were going to talk about COVID-19. I'm just going to let you off the lead.
I think the reason why we're discussing COVID-19 so much is it's the only news story going on at the moment that's dominating politics, and I think it would be awful if we're a current events podcast and we don't talk about this every week. So I think this has to be a new segment now of what's happened with coronavirus. Today I'm going to focus on care homes and what Michael Gove said on the Andrew Marr show yesterday, that they had a ring around protecting care homes, which, let's be honest, wasn't the case. Advice came out with what to do. Well, they said they formed it in February the 25th. They didn't say anything to protect it. They just said how to deal with if someone's exposed to coronavirus in care homes. The Scottish government actually took proper action. As they said, on the 11th of March, you should shut down care homes, no visits. We only did that on the 2nd of April. You look at 40% of all deaths of coronavirus come in care homes. And just to say now, for the past week, to be backtracking and say, oh no, we've never said this, like Boris Johnson said in PMQs, Matt Hancock, Michael Gove, all trying to defend that they've actually done a good job in care homes, is just, quite frankly, a lie. And they're just trying to recover up steps when really they should accept that they've messed up rather than trying to defend themselves, because it just makes them look more incompetent and less trustworthy. Like this whole debate around schools now between the unions and the government is because we're now starting to not trust what they say. Yeah, that's basically all I have got on it for care homes. What do you think, James?
There's a few things I'm going to pick you up on, but I will save the thing about the Scottish government for my little rant I'm going to do about the SNP. Now, the thing about the date that you mentioned about PMQs, there was a lot of discrepancy around that, because I think
it was like in February they said it was very highly unlikely that anything would happen in care homes and the rate of infection was very low. And basically Boris Johnson said, oh no, I never said that.
Yeah, there was a back and forth between Starmer and Johnson. I think they're both right at the same time, because the thing that Starmer was quoting was a policy or potential policy, but then it got changed and it got revoked and things were, switched around or whatever it was. So I didn't know at the time last Wednesday. In a sense, they were both right, but they were also both wrong at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit difficult to actually analyze that, just because it was to do with the wording and whether the document got properly published or not, or whether that was the official guidance, whether it was potential, etc, etc, etc. But yeah, with the thing with care homes, this whole they're saying they're throwing a ring. What it's like, basically describing it as like a life ring that you would throw out to a drowning person. Firstly, why would you need to throw a life ring out to the care homes if they were in a good enough state anyway, as they are claimed to be? They're claimed to say the care homes are fine. And then Boris has also said how the state of the care homes is, I can't remember the word, but I think it was something like disgraceful. They're all conflicting with each other. And so they're saying how we've got a life ring around them, but then they've also been protected so you wouldn't need a life ring, and and so there's a load of sort of conflicting statements and ideas, and they're all of them are trying to say the care homes aren't as bad as you might think they are. There's no one line of explanation about what they're doing with the care homes. It's all very conflicting. So yeah.
which is not good enough for the country. Like, we need one message, one simple statement, whereas we've not got that because they all can't go get in the rooms here. Right, we're going to say this. This is what we're going to say. It happened last week. Was Dominic Raab said, no, you can see two people at the same time. No, it's only one. This government is really starting to annoy me now about how they can't get the same message out. Like in Italy, in the La Repubblica newspaper, they said the confusion and contradiction displayed by the government rivals few others. The rest of the world is now looking at us going, what are you doing, guys? I mean, you're making a pig's ear of this.
The annoying thing for me is patriotism in its sense is sort of associated with the right wing. However, I would describe myself as patriotic, and I really do care how Britain stacks up in the rest of the world and how people view it, just because I think as a British person myself, that's how other nations are judging me. And so within Britain, obviously there's, your own issues of where you come from and whatever, but Britain in itself, we are the collective. And so what we look like to other nations in the world, I think is quite important, because it's also, if we can be mocked about coronavirus, we look less competent in other foreign affairs and things like that. So I think Britain's image is actually really important. And me, someone who would say they're patriotic, or someone who isn't patriotic, it's still important for the good of the nation that we look and we come across as an important, as competent, as world leading, or else we'll lose our influence. And what have we come across with this, with Brexit and coronavirus? We look completely useless, just bumbling around, making mistakes. Exactly. The government is not only seen as incompetent in our country, but on a world stage, we are a laughingstock. And it's just really upsetting for someone who takes pride in being British.
I think if I was a Conservative MP, I'd look at it and go, right, we just had Brexit and we need to prove to the people of this country that we're now a force in the world again, and we're coherent, we can manage things on ourselves, like get the sovereignty back, etc. We can do it, we're going our own way. And coronavirus would have been a good way to prove that, and we can deal with this really well. You look at what happened in Italy, but EU can't deal with it. But I just think it was a massive opportunity missed for them. And especially if they want to play up to this big world power now, they needed to deal with this well and present a good image to the world. And they've done exactly the opposite of that. The DPA in Germany called us Europe's problem child with coronavirus. And another thing that annoyed me about the government is when they're using, if people use common sense, we will be fine. And I hate it when they use common sense, because it then implies that it's not the government's responsibility anymore. It's now on the people's. We have nothing to do with it. We can't control people's common sense, when they should be the ones taking responsibility for this and getting us in this situation that they have done now.
You're not really the biggest fan of the Conservative government anyway, are you, Will? So they had the chance to prove themselves after the election. This would be a good chance to prove they're at least semi-competent. And they've not won you over, have they, Will?
No, I thought Boris at the beginning was sincere in some of the speeches he made, but now they've since about week 3, they've just delved into incompetency now, and I've run out of patience with it. And I know people are going to be like, you should support the government. I tried, but now is time to criticise, not needlessly criticising, but pointing them in the right direction. You should do this, like what Keir Starmer's doing at the moment.
We'll come on to him soon. There's just a few points that I was going to bring up. A few actual news articles that people might be interested in learning, developments on the crisis. So blood thinning medication that's usually used to prevent people who are prone to blood clots can be used to actually help save lives. The virus can clot blood that's basically in the lungs, and so you end up with really low oxygen levels in the body, but without the breathlessness that you'd get of somebody who's got lots of fluid on the lungs, like coronavirus can cause. So that's helping save lives. So that's a positive thing. It's not really the government who's done it, but at least somebody is doing something to help people. So that's nice. There's been an addition to the list of symptoms, which is a loss of smell and taste. That's potentially a symptom for a long time. The condition of losing your taste and smell is called anosmia. It's been ignored in the past. Apparently, it would only pick up an extra 2% more cases. However, 10 to 50% of affected patients have said it's been a symptom they've had, which is strange. You don't really get the maths behind that. How 2% more cases, but 10 to 50% of people said, but it's definitely a lot more than 2%. Anyway, I am not a virologist or a doctor or a scientist, just somebody who can count and doesn't understand that 2 isn't 10. There's not a huge amount going on, really. in the name of development. Well, we should be coming down the peak of the curve. Whether that's going to happen with all of the new freedoms we've had for a week now, I don't know.
So Keir's been in the job for what, 7 weeks now? James, how do you feel that he's been tackling the job?
Well, I was talking to my politics teacher recently, just a few emails back and forth. And so I said it's been interesting to see where the talent lies in the cabinet. And so she said, OK, well, from that, who do you think would be the next party leader after Boris Johnson? So I said, well, Michael Gove is relatively competent, but he's competent, but he could not be a leader of the country or the party, just because he's not the right guy for the job. Matt Hancock, I feel, is been thrown under the bus and will be thrown even further under the bus, as well as not being completely perfect. Let's be honest, in his response to this, there's been quite a few flaws there. Rishi Sunak is basically the party's hero because he's
in with a shout.
He's very intelligent, very competent. He's stayed well away from the medical stuff, which is very clever of him. You know, he is, at the end of the day, the Chancellor. He's in charge of the Treasury and the money and the economy, and nothing to do with the medical side. So I'm glad he's just completely steering clear of that. So Sunak's looking strong at the moment. But to be honest, the only person who I can imagine to be this country's next prime minister is Keir Starmer. He's actually shown competence, clarity, leadership, opposition where it's needed, praise where it's deserved. And he just seems to have everything so well tied together. And I'm really happy to say that Labour Party is beginning to look like something electable.
What's going on?
I'm a big Starmer fan.
I'm genuinely shocked. I didn't expect that. James is now Labour Party member.
No, well, I've been a Labour Party member for quite a while because I wanted to vote in the election because I did not want Labour to screw itself up again with Rebecca Long-Bailey. So I'm happy. I voted for Keir Starmer and I got Keir Starmer, and I'm glad with what I got, you know. Hi, so it's me here in the edit. I just want to clarify a few remarks that I made earlier about Keir Starmer. Now, I think he's a brilliant Labour leader, and I think he's going to be a great leader of the opposition, and he's somebody who Labour have needed for a long time. He's head and shoulders above Jeremy Corbyn. I think he's better than Ed Miliband ever was. However, he's not Tony Blair. He proclaims himself to be a socialist. I still prefer private enterprise, capitalist market forces with state regulation to protect, obviously. So for those of you who know me, I've not completely changed my politics, but I just think Keir Starmer, great guy.
I just feel like finally after 5 years we've got some proper opposition leader that can hold the government to account. If you had anyone other than Jeremy Corbyn, would have taken down Theresa May easily. I think Jeremy Corbyn's legacy, in my opinion, would always be the man who set Labour back another generation. I'm just going, like, you look at what happened in that 2019 election. You had Jacob Rees-Mogg saying it was common sense because of Grenfell that people died. They didn't use their common sense. Then you have the whole, fake Twitter account, Boris Johnson, that whole Twitter picture. Homelessness was how had risen, child poverty had risen over 9 years. And you go, after 9 years, they're getting the biggest majority they are, like since 87 for the Conservatives. I'm just going, anyone else who's in charge would have won in 2017 and potentially 2019 as well. But Keir Starmer is, I think the Telegraph wrote about him, he was cool, calm, collected and cold in the way he delivers his questions at Prime Minister's questions.
He's not emotional, is he?
No, he was a barrister in the end of the day, and he knows how to present the case. He knows how to answer questions. I just think the questions that he delivers are straight to the point, and he all he has to do is say the question and watch Boris have a meltdown and pretty much avoid the question at all costs. That's what he does.
Jeremy Corbyn's first ever interview with the Telegraph was a week before he left, whereas Keir Starmer has done video interviews, he's written bits and pieces for the Telegraph. Basically, as soon as he became leader, I think he'd written, columns for them, because you can't stay in an echo chamber. Jeremy Corbyn stayed in his little socialist hub with all the students telling him how brilliant he was, whereas Keir Starmer has actually understood politics is about winning over the people who don't vote for you already, which is actually really complicated, Will. Because if you don't get enough votes, right, you want more, then the people who haven't voted for you need to vote for you next time. Keir Starmer is very clever and competent, and he gets that himself. He understands how clever that is to actually make people vote for you who haven't voted for you in the past. So by doing interviews with right-leaning newspapers, you might get the right-leaning readers to think, oh, he's quite clever. Maybe we should give him a go.
I just think he's a sensible pair of hands at the wheel. And he knows what he needs to do. He knows how to answer the question. And it does help that he's got Boris Johnson there who hasn't answered a single question at PMQs that he has. And I think every Prime Minister's questions and First Secretary of State questions he's done to Dominic Raab. He's won every single one.
Yeah, Dominic Raab is not really a challenge for anybody, though, is he?
That's a different rant. Whereas Corbyn had this long spiel and then delivered a question, and most people forgot what he said. And it didn't look in control, and it was what most people wouldn't have asked that week. Whereas Starmer is answering, yes, the broadly simple questions, but they are the right questions and the questions that everyone wants to know. Yeah. And his first question is always a broad question, and then after that he delves deeper and deeper and deeper to get more and more detail in his 6 questions. And I think he's actually holding the government to account for once. So for the person who gave us the question on thoughts on Keir Starmer, that's our opinion on him. We think he's very good.
We're going to bring him back up later in our worst article, aren't we?
Yes, we are. But we think he's not only good for the Labour Party, but he's good for the country, as it actually we have some opposition for the first time in 5 years.
Can I give my little SNP rant?
Yes, you can give your little SNP rant. So what's been troubling you about the SNP?
Now, the SNP are very good at standing in Westminster, and Ian Blackford will have a go at the Conservative Party for being useless in government, 10 years of Tories, Regardless of what you think of the Conservative government, that's what the SNP are best at, right? Just criticise them. Well, many of the MPs in the Scottish Parliament have praised Sturgeon, and here's a quote: "There has been a virtually flawless tackling of coronavirus in Scotland." Now, as we've seen and highlighted, Scotland do have some autonomy over their coronavirus cases. They currently have a different policy to England, so it can't be blamed on the Tories, this bit can. So here are some statistics as to why the SNP aren't virtually flawless, and they're actually quite useless. So in late April, they were at 10% of their daily target for testing, and that's at the time where Matt Hancock was getting a huge amount of grief, and then he actually met the target. Care home deaths in Scotland, right, double England, and yet apparently it's, Boris Johnson's tackling of the care homes crisis has not been good. So what the hell is Nicola Sturgeon's? And apparently 58% of care homes in Scotland have had a case of coronavirus in them, which again cannot be defended. More than half of the care homes have got the most deadly disease that they'll probably ever have in them for a long time. So there was a policy that came out, which is elderly patients can be discharged from hospital before receiving a test result. Now, when the Scottish Health Secretary had been questioned by this, they hadn't even seen this policy or guidance, and it had to be repealed. The Health Secretary didn't know what their policy was, and so they had to change it because it was absolutely unbelievably dangerous.
Don't forget also Scotland's chief medical advisor had broken the lockdown rules.
Scotland have continued their lockdown though, so everybody can carry on being furloughed, and the Treasury in Westminster are footing the bill for Scotland's furlough scheme. So all the economic brilliance that's going on has been done by the Conservatives that Scotland wouldn't have done because if they were independent, which is what the SNP call for, and yet all of the stuff that they've been left to do has been, it's been atrocious. Not only they got double the ratio of deaths in care homes, but the SNP's actual handling of just government over the past however many years they've been in,
since, I think 2007,
also highlights how they may be criticising the Conservative Party for being completely incompetent, but so are they. So the attainment gap between deprived students hasn't moved since they've come to power. Reading, science and math standards have fallen. It's the second biggest drop in the world, and England haven't, right? So it's not about a Conservative education system. This is the SNP who have control over the Scottish curriculum. The SNP pulled out of 2 other surveys that were assessing students' performance. I wonder why that was. Maybe they didn't want people scrutinising how useless they've been. They failed to meet so many healthcare targets. So, for example, for the past 8 years, they've missed a cancer target to do with getting urgent treatment within 2 months. They've got 3 times as many drugs deaths. And yet, because of the way funding works, Scotland get more money per head than England does, right? So not only do they get more funding for their health service than we do in England, but they're useless with it. It's unbelievable. We talk about the NHS crisis being a whole terrible thing about the Conservative Party, and by and large, they've not done a great deal to help it out. There's huge waiting lists and underfunding and, staff shortages everywhere. But the SNP, who claim to be the shining light, look at us, independent Scotland, aren't we brilliant? They're even more useless. I just can't get my head around it. Just on the whole, whether it's the SNP as a government or their tackling of the crisis, the MPs in the SNP seem to think they are perfect and brilliant and they are the embodiment of why Scotland should be independent. But if you actually look past their opposition in Westminster to their actual governance as a party in power in Scotland, they have got nothing to be proud of. Rant over. I don't like the SNP, and I've discovered so much which proves why you shouldn't like them either. Right, what's next?
HS2?
Yeah, go for it.
In an external report Friday or Saturday, HS2 was described as badly off course, and investigations as well also accused the Department of Transport and Grand Shapps from hiding information that's going on for HS2. So I just think it's just another way of sucking more money into London rather than giving it back, because who's going to go to London to Manchester to do their work?
One thing I was thinking of, right, all developed nations now are just, and they have been for a long, long time, getting wealthier and wealthier, and the population have just got more and more disposable income, right? And so we've got if we can spend £100 billion on transport infrastructure, car autonomy is getting better and better. So whilst they may not be able to just drive around and whiz you to the shops and back without a license, you can sit on the motorway and they'll whiz you up and down. You don't really have to do anything. Just keep your eyes on the road. Stick the radio on, have the time of your life, right? And so motorway travel is getting easier and easier and easier. And if electric cars, which is the government want, they're going to ban all petrol and diesel sales from 2035 onward.
Last week in Prime Minister's Questions, they're putting, once coronavirus is finished, they're putting an extra £1 billion into electric vehicles. Infrastructure. £1 billion is not going to cover it, right?
No.
You look at, right, so every single car park space is going to need to have a pod point or a supercharger point, yeah? Every single household is going to need one, yeah? And then, but what about people who don't have a driveway and live in an apartment or live in a terrace house and they have to park their car on the road? What are they going to do? Like, £1 billion is nowhere near enough to cover this, and the government needs to wake up and say, oh yeah, because it's not enough. It barely scratches the surface.
Exactly. And so if people are going to be driving driverless cars more, spend money improving the motorways, because that'll be that's an efficient way now to drive around if its cars are electric. We invest in sustainable electricity, invest in a charging network so people actually buy the cars. The main reason most people don't buy electric cars is not the cost, right? Because if I've got 50 grand to spend on an electric car, I could buy a Tesla, or I could buy a diesel Audi, BMW, Mercedes, right? And I'll buy a diesel Audi, Mercedes because I'll fill it up, which takes 2 minutes, then I'll drive 700 miles, and then I'll fill it up again. With electric cars, you've got range anxiety. You end up with a much reduced range. There's terrible infrastructure for it, and
the infrastructure is improving. Like the Tesla superchargers are quite good pieces of work.
That's private investment, though. You can't rely on all the private companies to do the same, because you just end up with a monopoly like Tesla are having on the market at the moment.
Yes. Do you remember when everyone was saying the Northern Powerhouse this, Northern Powerhouse that? Like George Osborne picked the Northern Powerhouse. The Northern Pennine Expressway is still diesel. In 1948, the whole French network was electrified.
I know.
1948.
It's
we
unbelievable.
Are still peddling diesel trains around. Build your Northern Powerhouse, and then you can focus on HS2. Increase local rail, increase the capacity, electrify it, improve the timetable, make it become more efficient. More people get to work on time, rather than just sucking more jobs into London.
Yeah. What you want to do is have much more interconnected towns locally, so they can use the railway to get around, because you end up with more people using the railway, so you have lower carbon. You're right, the French had an electrified railway and we're still on diesel, which is unbelievable. We also don't have an extensive rail network like we should do.
No.
It's just, it's crazy. And then, the whole HS2 thing is being proved almost unnecessary by this coronavirus crisis. So not only do we not have as much money to spend as we expected to have, this coronavirus crisis has proved that working from home and being much more digital in the workplace is very easy. It's very productive because you don't have to commute as far. Zoom meetings on the whole are maybe not as good, but good enough for discussing most things. So there will be a huge reduction in the amount of commuting and traveling people will need to do. And so now our rail network's already behind the rest of Europe. Now that we're already becoming more and more technological, we don't need to be moving around as much. It's like Concorde, right? Concorde was brilliant for 30 years because if you want to do a big business deal in America, you fly over, you shake their hand and you fly back. That wasn't really as necessary because, there was much more, the emails becoming a thing and phone calls and people had mobile phones. It was much, much easier, right? So the technology outgrew Concorde. I think technology is already beginning to outgrow the need for HS2 to whiz you up and down the country from London to Manchester just so you can have a couple of meetings. Just Skype them. We've learned that now because of coronavirus. It's not needed. It's spending where we don't need to be spending. It's going to take money away from other infrastructure that really needs going, whether it's the electric car network or other travel or, for the 5G. So we've got so much infrastructure that needs spending and we don't need a high-speed rail network. Who cares if we can whiz up and down the country at 200 miles an hour when you can
My dad always brings the argument of, it improves capacity for the railway. Well, why don't you just improve capacity regionally? And for the other trains as well, and then improve the standards of the trains. And
you don't need to be going at 200 miles an hour to improve the capacity.
No, exactly.
Just put more trains on the line.
Exactly, and improve the infrastructure around it.
Yeah, and make sure they're not late. I'm going to say, have a little break in the recording. I'll make a coffee and make myself some squash. Then we'll move on. Hi, so it's me here in the edit, and I just thought I could use the time that Will and I had a break to tell you all to have a break. If you're not going to listen to this podcast all the way through, then now it's about halfway. It's a good time to switch off and come back to it later. You can listen to a few of the things that Will and I said over the break, and some noises that Will randomly started making. But yes, I just thought, grab a biscuit, get yourself a coffee like I did, and enjoy the rest of the podcast. I'm back, waiting for the kettle to boil, and I'm writing some questions now, so we can start up again soon. I'll just don't want the background noise of the kettle. How do you think it's going so far?
I think it's going good. I think my personal performance was better last week than this week.
I think I might have been. I noticed there's no economics this week, which I'm not really bothered about. Right, I'm just gonna make my coffee. I've got 1.5 litres of squash. I think that's probably enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, Will, I'm going to give you some kettle ASMR. I'm going to pour my coffee in front of the microphone. Back from the break, and we're moving on to the US.
Yes, again. And our favourite news topic, Donald Trump. Woo!
Let's be honest, when it comes to US and politics and current events, he is all you can talk about.
Yeah,
because
he's all that's really focused on at the moment. So,
but Donald Trump is US politics. Just that he is it. That's it. It's just him.
He's the person that most people identify with. He's not the whole US politics.
But no, what I mean is, that's how he sees himself. You think of the US political landscape and he just dominates it because he wants to, and he makes it all about himself. He doesn't really allow for other airtime unless he is criticizing others, such as Obamagate.
That was a good sequence, actually.
I'm just brilliant. I'm going to be full on James O'Brien.
You are. So, I've received many questions in my family and from people who read Trump's Twitter going, what was he talking about with Obamagate? So the broad issue is he's accused Obama of unmasking. James, you go into this because you read this, because the substance base is really nothing to it, because he's gone. Everyone knows what it is. It's been going on for a long time.
Mr. President, in one of your Mother's Day tweets, you appear to accuse President Obama of the biggest political crime in American history by far. Those were your words. What crime exactly are you accusing President Obama of committing, and do you believe the Justice Department should prosecute him?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected, and it's a disgrace that it happened. And if you look at what's gone on, and if you look at now all of this information that's being released, and from what I understand, that's only the beginning. Some terrible things happened, and it should never be allowed to happen in our country again. And you'll be seeing what's going on over the coming weeks. But I wish you'd write honestly about it, but unfortunately, you choose not to do so. Yeah, John, please.
Crime. What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours. John, please.
I think it's a way of distracting, obviously, the people and the media from talking about Corona, and he's desperately trying to push away that image now. But I see it as this is now finally, like, Obamagate itself doesn't have really any real legs to it, in my opinion, because even Lindsey Graham, who's a senator, who he asked to do a investigation into Obamagate, as it's called now, turned it down and said, no, it's not possible to do it, especially at this time with the election and coronavirus going on. So I don't feel it will have that much legs to it until the presidential election. But I feel that yes, like last week, and while he's been tweeting at about Obamagate, is now his final, right, we're going to kick off the campaign now. This is the slogan that's going to rile up the base and get them all going. So it's like, the best quote I heard from it was, it's a slogan in search of a scandal. It's trying to build up the base to tell all the Republican Party, right, here we go, let's get ready, let's gear up for this election. But I also find it interesting now how, even though it's going to be Trump versus Biden, Obama said he's coming out of so-called semi-retirement and he's now going to campaign full-time. And I think that's an interesting, like, subplot battle between Trump and Obama that is going to play out over this election.
Just quickly, for those who don't know, what are the claims of Obamagate? If you could just summarize it, like, what would you say the scandal actually is? The gate bit comes from the Watergate scandal.
Watergate. Yeah.
Many scandals after that have just sort of assumed the gate part of the name. So if you're confused where that comes from, it comes from a scandal back in 1973.
Yep.
With Richard Nixon.
Richard Nixon, who spied on the Democratic Party in the Democratic National Convention, got loads of records for the election in 1974.
So what is the scandal? What is Trump alleging? So, I know I've put the clip in about him saying Obamagate is Obamagate, but what's the basis behind it?
So what I think it is, and what's been reported, because none of us really know what it is. We think it's the unmasking of Trump's advisors and people who work for Trump, like unmasking them using the NSA. I hate to sound so terribly misinformed on it, but we genuinely don't know what it is, because he's literally just said everyone knows what it is without knowing what it is. So that's why I just think it's a slogan to G up the base and to get everyone ready for the election and what's to come.
Well, one of the main things is the unmasking of one of Trump's advisors who went to prison for basically colluding with the Russians.
Was it Michael Flynn?
Yeah.
So Michael Flynn he hasn't been charged for Russian collusion. He's been charged perjury, which is lying to the FBI.
Yeah, but it was because he was colluding with the Russians, basically.
Yeah.
That's why the FBI were investigating him. And so in this investigation, normally people are anonymous, but very often they can be unmasked, as the term is, just because if it's important to, the US political security, whatever it might be. And so thousands of people every day are unmasked and government officials get to know who they are. But as soon as it happened to Michael Flynn, Trump's advisor, it's a big issue and there's a scandal and it's Obama stealing state secrets and publishing people's names unrightfully, and it's the biggest scandal in US political history, as Trump claims. There's nothing there, right?
No, there is no legs to it. I think it would turn up again if Trump gets elected again, which I think is a real 50-50 at the moment, especially because of how this is all played out.
You got to remember, Will, lots of people thought that the 2019 election was going to be 50-50 over here.
That's true. But I think it'll be 50-50. I can't call it at the moment, because I never trust American polls. The media there is so much more partisan than it is over here. But I think it'll be 50-50, because obviously you got his base quite big, and then you got people who don't really like Joe Biden, which is less than Hillary Clinton. But I genuinely think It's going to be a proper toss-up this year. I couldn't call it yet. Whereas back in 2016, we were all like, yeah, it's Hillary Clinton, when we were very wrong. I don't know. And you think on the 2019 election is, I think me and you both knew that it was going to be a Conservative majority.
I didn't think it was going to be as big as it was, but yeah.
No,
yeah.
we both said that. We didn't think it was going to be as big as it was. I think I said 20 or 30.
I thought they were going to get about 340 seats probably.
Yeah, you said less than me. I don't think the US election is far more intriguing than the 2016 one.
Yeah, I think my take on it is going to be that the issue is now Trump has been in office, and so his base will always be his base, They're mad and they're radicalized and they're all.
Well, the whole point of US elections is, right, you appeal to your base, and then it's how much you reach out to the centre.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have your things that appeal to the base, and then you reach out how much you dare reach out and grab the electorate, because it's like, yeah, that's basically how US elections run. It is a bit like how elections run over here, only they have a much bigger base because there's a lot more people, and there's a lot more people identified as Democrats or Republicans and independents as well.
It's mostly a two-party system, right? So
exactly.
what you end up with is 40-40, and then it's that middle 20% that you have to grab. Yeah. And so
that's why swing states are so important.
Yeah, well, exactly. The thing is with Trump is his base are always going to support him, but I hope that after 4 years in power as president, they will finally sort of notice, okay, look where we are now, look how he is. I think back in 2016, he was almost like the anti-politician, and I can understand why swing voters will have voted for him. But now he's almost so much of a caricature. I think it's going to be more of an election of we're not going to vote for Biden because he's perfect, but he's the least bad.
See, I genuinely see 2016. The more and more I look back at it, and that election, the more and more how I understood how he was elected. Mm-hmm. Because he spoke about jobs, he was fed up by people who were left behind in those Rust Belt states, which are the key important swing states. And Clinton never addressed that whatsoever and talked about identity politics this, identity politics that, and just rested on the laurels like, yeah, it's Donald Trump, I'm going to beat him. And he also was very clever, or his advisors were, in only campaigning in those swing states, Wisconsin especially. Hillary Clinton never visited there, and it turned Republican from Democrat. And he put all his funding into places like Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, whereas Clinton just went spend everywhere, and that's how it worked. That is Obamagate in the 2020 election sorted.
Well, one thing I mentioned to Will earlier that I'll mention to the listener: Donald Trump has got a spokeswoman for him because he's too incompetent to answer any questions.
Kayleigh McEnery. Sorry if I've butchered your name. I know you're not going to listen to this.
We're not really good at names on this podcast, so
no. So Kayleigh McEnery, that's what I'm going with. So I think the reason why they're pushing her out a lot more now is because obviously Trump's press conferences are going down like a lead balloon. And these advisors are identified as that's the main reason why he's losing so much support and why Biden is opening up a lead in the polls. And I think the reason why they're pushing her out now is because she can stay on message. Also, she can shut down reporters far better than Trump ever can. Like you look at Monday last week, where he walked off. You wouldn't get her doing that, and she answers the question quite well and stays on message. Yes, it might not be what we agree with a lot of the time, but she's a lot better at press conferences than Trump ever will be. Me and you could be better than Donald Trump on press conferences.
Do you think she's the most talented person in the Trump administration to be answering the question?
The most sensible people in the administration at the moment is Dr. Fauci and all his medical advisors, because they're actually taking it seriously.
This woman's a lawyer, isn't she? So
yes.
She's very talented, very intelligent. She just happens to be a Trump supporter. What's next?
Worst news story. Usually I take the lead on this, but I'm going to let you.
Well, there's a few that I wanted to bring up. So you're going to hear some newspaper rustling now. I'm just going to grab the Sunday Telegraph that's on my bed, right? And so you actually open it up, and it's just full of stuff it's nice to have a bit of levity in these times, but it's just full of stuff that you don't need to know. So, for example, Royal Swan Census scrapped as social distancing curbs bite. Basically, they count the swans in the River Thames, and they can't do that this year because of social distancing. Then there's something about ABBA and Eurovision, and if anybody who knows me knows I'm not a fan of Eurovision. I know you like it, Will.
Yeah, I love Eurovision.
I
Oh my
didn't
God.
even read the article.
I just enjoy it because it's so bizarre. Weird and wonderful stuff.
The least significant article was a very short one. A fox got his head stuck in a vase, and the RSP had to save it.
Content.
I know, it's just filling up its space because there's no actual news going on. Obviously, as we know, we've now started a little feature where I have a moan about a Guardian opinion article. It's just, as I said last week, I think some of the opinion articles are unreasonable and unhelpful. So this week comes from Stuart Lee, right? And he's a comedian that I really like. I think he's hilarious. I love his style of comedy, and his articles in The Guardian, even though I don't often agree with them, I think, well written, funny, carry on doing what you're doing, mate. But this week, just not very good at all. And it was so bad that the reason I discovered this article is because it went all over Twitter. Now, he starts off by talking about a tweet from Tom Tugendhat, who is one of my favourite Conservative MPs at the moment. I think he's very intelligent. He's ex-soldier, has a lot to do with foreign affairs, and that's my sort of favourite part of politics, which is quite interesting. So I think, he's an interesting guy. He's one of the most talented people in government when we don't have many. So he starts off with a tweet from him, and then he starts saying many names, Fisher, Cook, Smith, derive from ancient trades, but Tugendhat is just 3 different words put together, like wasp cup finger, or appendix hospital wool, or abortion macaque symptom. This former intelligence officer is the nephew of a real man called Baron Tugendhat. Baron Tugendhat is not the character from a 19th century German children's book about a baron with a weird hat, at the end of which gets tugged. But what did Tom Tugendhat... Wow! Great comedy there! Tugendhat, tug end hat. Ha 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 ha. He's basically just poking fun at a foreign name. Now, if that was done in any other paper that wasn't The Guardian, that would have there's been a huge outcry. So the main article isn't just deconstructing Tugendhat's name, but the name is of Jewish heritage. Now, I don't think that Stuart Lee is an anti-Semite, even if taking the mick out of the name was inadvertently anti-Semitic. But just poking fun at a foreign-sounding name isn't clever or witty. It's just, as I saw it described on Twitter, playground-level racism, right? Now, whether it was intentionally malicious or not, in the sense of being racist rather than just taking the mick out of a Conservative politician, it's not good writing. And he just keeps on going on about tug end hat. It's not funny, it's not clever, it's not sophisticated. But my point is, right, Stuart Lee, you're hilarious, you're one of my favourite comedians, you're a brilliant writer, even if we don't share the same politics. And I quite often love reading your articles. But taking the mick out of a foreign-sounding name without properly researching it and finding out it's of Jewish heritage, and then comparing it to abortion macaque symptom as a name, is just unnecessarily bigoted. And it's in The Guardian, which is something that's meant to be fighting for social justice.
I just think it wasn't needed.
He's blatantly running out of ideas. So that's my rant about The Guardian this week. A badly researched and misinformed opinion article. So, a Guardian opinion article.
As much as James hates The Guardian opinion, I really dislike the Mail. It's the one I hate the most. So, along with The Sun and all other tabloids, I hate tabloids. The worst news story, in my opinion, was published in the Mail only yesterday. And it said, the headline reads, Man of the People, Keir Starmer owns up to £10 million worth of land. Right, he was born into poverty, pretty much. And just to say, the way he's made his living was through being a barrister, defending human rights for the working classes. So he's been a guy that's lived and seen what it's like to be in a working class family, and also helped defend those rights for those people. And to what I say to the Mail is, so you've noted Boris Johnson down as a man of the people, when this is a guy who's gone to Eton, to Oxford, written for the Telegraph.
He describes £250,000 a year as chicken feed.
Exactly. And they've called him a man of the people, whereas Keir has actually seen what it's like to be a working class family and be a working class person, whereas Boris has never been a working class person in his life. I just think it's hypocritical, awful reporting, because it misleads the public again and again and again.
I also saw this article and took down some notes. He was being criticised for buying his parents a field to put some rescue donkeys in.
Exactly.
He used his money from defending human rights to then look after donkeys for his mum, who was a nurse, and his dad, who was a toolmaker. Now, the Mail, right, is a conservative-leaning paper. Now, one thing that conservatives really like is somebody coming from whatever beginnings, but creating wealth for themselves. So, for example, Keir Starmer, who came from an impoverished background, gained himself a net worth of £10 million, which is something that should be applauded. It's what the Conservatives should want people to be doing. You don't just stay in a cycle of poverty. Instead, he's incredibly educated, he's incredibly clever. No matter his background, he's gone and made money for himself. And my point with that is, the Mail is then discouraging it. You know, look at Keir Starmer. He's rich. You can't vote for him. He's successful. You can't vote for successful people if you're a Labour supporter. Yes, you can. It just proves how clever and intelligent he is.
And it says to people that, oh, look, he's out of touch, when actually he's been defending and sticking up for the working classes all his life.
Right, so he's got a net worth of £10 million. So I did the maths on this. If he was in politics for the money, to get a net worth of £10 million, and you've got to remember, because his parents had very humble jobs, lots of his net worth isn't inherited, but he's made it himself. So for him to get £10 million as an MP, he would have to be an MP for 125 years, right? So from that, we know he's not in politics for the money. So regardless of his net worth, he's not money focused, because he would still be a wealthy barrister. The article has no backing at all. What he said is, I'm wealthy and successful, and so I'll use my benefit in life, you know, my upper hand that he's now got. He's a successful guy, and I'll turn it to some good. And I don't know why that's a bad thing, because this podcast is going to come across as me being the world's biggest Keir Starmer supporter. I really like the guy. It's just a shame that he's not politically aligned with me.
Should we move on to defend the indefensible? Let me just go over the rules. So defend the indefensible is, I'm going to say a statement to James that is contrary to his beliefs or just outright wrong, and he's got to try and defend it for 30 seconds. So, James, would you like to go first or second?
Should we flip a coin or something?
Yes, I've got a coin here. So yeah, James, heads or tails?
Heads. Queen. The monarch. Britain.
It's heads!
Hey, right.
Do you want to go first or second?
Second, please.
Second. I'll time myself.
Do you want statement 1, 2, or 3?
2.
We should dismantle the welfare state. Go.
Of course we dismantle the welfare state. Margaret Thatcher was absolutely right. I mean, it promotes people to be lazy and to sit on their arse all day. I mean, you look what's happening with the furlough scheme now. People are just being lazy, working, and it costs too much money as well. It practically bankrupts the whole country. I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful. We shouldn't have it. I mean, workers should also be about working how many hours in the week and spending as much time as they can at work to improve their social mobility and to get the nation to be more productive. Jesus Christ, that was hard. I did not enjoy that one bit.
I bet that wasn't easy. Well done, Will, though. I just clipped that up into say people who use the welfare state are lazy, and then that'll go everywhere when you're a civil servant or whatnot.
Yeah, but then context of the game.
Context doesn't matter in these days.
And surely this should be good for my civil service, because I can defend something that's really indefensible.
Of course. Right, my turn.
Okay, I've got one.
God.
I, on election night, would rather have seen Jeremy Corbyn romp to a landslide victory. Go.
Right, so as we saw in 1945, one thing that was really important is after after many years of conservatism, we ended up being reset by a socialist government, and that's what should have happened on election night, because it was 9 years of conservative rule. We needed to be reset. We needed socialism. We needed a short, sharp punch in the face of 5 years of absolutely loving everybody and spending so much money, because the Conservatives did so much damage that they needed the 5 years before the Conservatives could get elected again to sort of reset. It's like pressing the number on the stop clock.
Time up.
Was that all right?
It's good.
I don't know why I've suddenly brought in 1945, but
yeah, I don't know where you got that from. I was like,
well, it's because we had a socialist government straight after Tory administration in the war, didn't we?
Like, it's not the route I would have taken, but we'll go with it. So I'll have statement 1, please.
So, Will, this is another one for you.
Yes.
Boris Johnson is the best Prime Minister we've had since Margaret Thatcher. Go.
Boris Johnson is undoubtedly the best Prime Minister we've ever had since Margaret Thatcher. He delivered on Brexit. He got Brexit done absolutely finally, something that we've been languishing on for 4 years. He's also been a statesman and handled coronavirus really well, whilst also getting coronavirus. And he put himself in intensive care because he kept working hard. That man should be a statesman figure. We should build a statue of him because he's led this country into a proper state of affairs. He's dependable and always the guy on our side. He may be an idiot, but he's our idiot, and I love him for it.
He may be an idiot, but he's our idiot.
Well, that's how people have described him. Right, you ready for your next statement? Donald Trump is the picture of sense and calm. I would vote for him in a heartbeat.
Right, you've got to think about Donald Trump and his tackling of coronavirus. You've seen him. He's pointed out this is China. You want to know why it's a problem? You ask China. You don't have to ask Donald Trump. He is a picture of clarity because he points you right to the source. You don't have to ask him. That's so unnecessary. Just ask China. Why is there so many problems in the US? It's Obama. He provides clear solutions to all the problems. It's Obama, it's the communists and the Mexicans. He's clear in spouting crap. Oh, that was a bit strange as well. Right, Will, you'll go again. Okay, this one's slightly different, but equally or even more challenging potentially. Jeremy Corbyn was a necessary part in the history of the Labour Party. Go.
Jeremy Corbyn was, of course, a necessary part of the Labour Party. I mean, he brought socialism back onto the table. He talked about real socialism. He talked about people's lives and workers' rights. It reinvigorated the Labour Party and the Labour membership to keep going on and become even more passionate. You look at it now, the Labour Party is one of the most popular parties in the whole of Western Europe, over 600,000 members. Before that, in the New Labour days, we never had anything like that. It brought the Labour Party back into touch with normal people of this country.
Well done.
That was a lot better than the other two.
Yeah, that was your best one probably.
For your next one.
I've only written 3, but
I've got 5.
I can quickly try and come up with some more.
James Baker, would like to see Priti Patel or Dominic Raab as the next Prime Minister of this country. Go.
Well, you've got to think. I'm going to go with Dominic Raab on this, just because he's the first Secretary of State. He's the heir to the throne of prime ministerial power. You've got to think, why Dominic Raab? Well, he was Prime Minister in not in name, but he was kind of Prime Minister during the COVID crisis for a very short amount of time. He's been Brexit Secretary. He's held many cabinet positions. He's got lots of experience. You've got to think when the Conservative government has had a bit of a talent drain. Dominic Raab's been in the cabinet for a few years.
I love how you didn't mention Priti Patel at all.
No. Oh, I've got to ask you a statement now that I haven't thought of. Right, okay. The Iraq War was necessary.
I mean, the Iraq War was totally necessary. I mean, it strengthened our relationship with the USA and it brought stability to that region for a time. I mean, we took it down a tyrannical dictator in Saddam Hussein, and we actually did a proper job there. I mean, we also got oil in that country, a vital resource that we needed for our country. And overall, it was a very, very sensible decision to go in. I mean, we got a load of support. That's 30 seconds done.
I actually thought you were Tony Blair after the Chilcot inquiry.
I thought it was hellish. When it just said I brought stability to the region, I was literally like, right, you just lied there, Will.
It was most entertaining for me when you ran out of ideas of what to say, so you just said, we got some oil.
Why did I ever come up with it?
Give me the next one, Will.
I hate the Conservative Party, so I, James Baker, am defecting to Labour and being a Corbynite Labour supporter. Go.
Well, the issue with the Conservative Party is after we've seen of 10 years of cuts and deprivation and austerity is it just doesn't work. And so regardless of what you think about the Conservative Party's economic policy of just, sort of being a capitalist thing, it hasn't worked. We're in a worse state in many ways as we have compared to how we were in the past. So I'm going to defect to Labour. And I don't do things by halves. I'm a man of my word. So if I'm going to defect to Labour, I'm going to go the whole hog. Why not be an absolute communist?
Well, you say I lie, and then you just called him a communist.
It's the first word that came to mind. I was going to say Corbynist, but then communist just sort of fell out of my mouth.
This is my last one, thank God.
We should have state-controlled press and state-controlled internet. Go.
I mean, we should absolutely have state-controlled press and state-controlled media. I mean, we have the BBC controlled by the state, an absolute institution, absolutely neutral, and it doesn't matter if we don't have any opposition, because I trust the word that my government says, and I know they're not going to spy on me. And I think we should absolutely have state-controlled internet as well, because it was able to track down who is... Oh, I've messed it up, but... I pulled it! No! I was going to say state-controlled internet so that government is able to see and protect most of the people in this country from potential extremists. But then I got my words muddled. That would have filled the remaining 10 seconds.
My final one?
James, your final question is, Boris Johnson is a coward and a political chameleon. I want him out of a job now.
It's true. Boris Johnson is a coward. You have to look at the coronavirus press meetings. He's no longer being interviewed by journalists. It's now questions from the public, which are, pre-recorded. He can see them beforehand. There's no interrogation and questioning there. There's the cowardice for you straight away. I've forgotten the second part of the question. Oh, yeah. Why should he be out of the... Political chameleon? Of course he is. Think about it. It was, let's get Brexit done, but he'd written 2 articles whether he should back Brexit or not previously. He's now a One Nation conservative, but when he's voted for all these previous things in the past, there we are. That'll do. that was a bit rubbish because I forgot the question.
I think you've won a game for once. Woo. All I'm thinking, leave this bit in, is when we're wanting to get into politics and someone finds this podcast and edits it out of context. Oh, that's gonna be fun. Yeah.
If you have any ideas for games or questions or things, we've got an Instagram which is something at the centre, no capitals, no nothing, no underscores, just something at the centre, and so you can find us on there. Email address something@thecenter@gmail.com. Email us, whatever, contact us in some way with games or questions or whatever you might want to ask us.
Even contact us on our in person or on our social media if you want a question as well. You don't follow the account. So yeah.
Most of you, I'd say probably 99.9% of you listening know us personally, so just send us a quick message on Snapchat, whatever it might be, and then hopefully this will be out by Thursday. That's my target, to get this out by Thursday.
Well, you can smash it. I'll keep you on track. So is that a wrap?
I think that might be it. We're all done. That's a wrap. It's a tortilla. It's a flatbread. It's a pizza. No, Will, waffles aren't bread. Okay. So, there's no waffling going on here. We're on tortillas, we're on tiger loaves, we're on rolls, we're on baps, but it certainly is a wrap.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you everybody for listening. We've been Something at the Centre. See you again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening. This is that last bit. You've got to keep that in.
Yeah,
got to keep that in. This is an absolute debacle. We do apologise.
You have been listening to Something Near the Centre, presented by James Baker and Will Turner, and edited by me, James Baker. Thanks for listening. See you again next week.